What's going on, everybody? Jesse here, and welcome back to another episode in the Blueprints to C++ series. Today's episode, we're just going to go ahead and continue expanding our base item C++ class. We're going to put the properties and functions in there. We're going to create a new interact interface in C++, and we're going to extend that into our world item in C++. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today's episode and others just like it are brought to you by the patrons listed on the screen. If you'd like to support the channel and future development, then consider visiting my Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can receive various benefits such as early access to my videos, project downloads, as well as personalized support. You may also want to consider joining the community by joining my Discord server, where you can receive help from me as well as the community. So come on over and be a part of the conversation. All right, we're going to start here in the BP base item. This is the old BP base item, not the new one that we created in the previous episode. And we're going to go ahead and recreate this in C++. So you can see all these different variables that we have over here. We're just going to go ahead and take this as well as the use item function, and we're going to put it into C++ into our new class. One thing we're going to exclude is a billboard texture. We're not going to move this one forward. And there's going to be one other change that we're going to do in here. So let's go ahead and head over to C++. All right. So we're here in the base item.h, and let's go ahead and start creating some properties here. We got, let's go ahead and create a public specifier here. And there is going to be one change that we're going to do that I'm going to do as we move forward here. And when we're making pointers to objects previously, so right now we need a uStatic mesh. So we would go uStatic mesh pointer, and then we'd give it a name static mesh and call that good. But Unreal in version Unreal 5, they started pushing, and I only recently found this out, so we're going to make some changes as to our code as we go along, but they're changing the way they prefer us to do this a different way. So let's go ahead and change this pointer here. We're going to go TObject PTR, so TObject pointer. This is their own version of a smart pointer. This is still compatible with the U property. So unlike other smart pointers that you can't use U properties on, this one, they prefer that we use this when making a hard reference pointer. Like I said, it's still compatible with U properties. So we're going to make this change whenever I come across a hard pointer that I have. And you could do it either way that you want. This one's a little bit more optimized. So we're going to stick with that one. So we go TObject pointer, and then we put U static mesh in the angle brackets. And then we're going to give a name static mesh. And I actually want to initialize it with a null PTR. All right, we'll come back and do a U property on in a minute. The next one, we're going to do an F text. We're going to call this interact text. And we're going to give it initialization F text from string. And we're going to say pickup is going to be the default. Next up will be an F name, and we're going to call it display name. F text, use action text, and we're going to initialize it F text from string, and use will be our default. Next, before we had a hard reference to the uTexture2D thumbnail, I'm not going to do that this time. I haven't done this yet in my lead project. I just recently made a change to it. We're going to make this a TSoftObject pointer. If we have any issues with it, then I'll come back and change it, but I think we'll be okay using it this way. uTexture2D, and we're going to call this thumbnail. And the reason why I'm doing this is because this thumbnail, we can have a decent amount of these. We don't want to keep these all in memory if we don't need to. We want to call it whenever we need it. So that way we have the free resources available when we need it. Next up, let's go F text item description, and we're not going to give any default value on that one. Int 32 stack size. I'm going to initialize this as a 5 default value. Next is a bool B should die, and I'm going to give it a default value of false. And lastly, we're going to go float despawn time equal 1.f. So we're not going to do the billboard on this. We're still going to have a billboard available, but really that's just for when you're level prototyping stuff. It might make it a little bit easier to find it. You can still change the sprite on the billboard without having this value. It's just you have to change each one individually rather than have it as a default value. If you want to create the variable like we had before, then go right ahead and do it, but I'm not going to worry about doing it at this point. All right, so now let's go ahead and create a U property, and the reason why we waited is this is all pretty much going to be the same thing. So let's go uProperty, blueprint, read only. We're going to go edit anywhere and give it a category equal to, and I'm going to start changing my categories to all of them since this is in the inventory plugin, inventory, pipe, item, pipe, characteristics. And then I'm just going to copy this entire uProperty and let's just paste this down for all of them. All right, now with that, let's go ahead and create our function. So I'm going to make this a public and it's going to be void use item. We don't need any arguments. And then let's give it a u function of blueprint native event, blueprint callable, and a category equal to inventory item. And if you're not familiar with the blueprint native event is, there's two of these actually, blueprint native event and a blueprint implementable event. And the difference between the two is a native event is one where you can have a C++ default value. So we can set this function use item as default in C++, and it can be overwritten and extended in blueprints. Whereas in a blueprint implementable event, which we will have one of those shortly, those are only overwritable in blueprints. There is no C++ default function for that. So that's the difference between the two. We're going to make this a blueprint native event. And there we go. So go ahead and compile that. And then let's just go ahead and generate the definition for this. And we're just going to do like what we did in blueprints for the time being. We're just going to give it a generic feedback. We're going to go uInventory statics. We're going to go print string and we're going to say used items. Now every time we use an item, this will be called as default. And there we go. So let's head back into the editor real quick and we can create an interface for our interact function. All right, open up the content browser down here, come down and I'm going to open up our C++ classes here. We got some folders in here. I'm just going to right click. I'm going to go create a new class and scroll all the way down to the bottom here and we should see Unreal Interface. Go ahead and select that and hit next. I'm going to call mine interact. I'm going to make sure it is in the plug-in runtime. And then from there, I'm going to create a new folder and call it interfaces, and then go ahead and select create class. With that created, let's go ahead and get rid of our typical error here when creating folders. There we go. And I'm going to build this just so it updates into the editor. And then let's head over into the interact.h. And if you haven't done interfaces in C++, they're not too bad to use, but there's a couple things going on here. One, we've got a class specification here for the interface. And as this comment says, this class does not need to be modified. So just leave this one as it is. It's going to give us some default generated body that we have here in this macro. But where we need to put our functions is right here underneath the iInteract below the generated body. It tells you here, add interface functions to this class. This is the class that will be inherited to implement this interface. So I'm going to create a public specifier here. And in here, we're going to go, if we look at our original interactable blueprint interface, you're going to see we've got interact and we got set look at. So if we double click this and look at it, we've got an inventory that's coming in. And then if we look at set look at, we've got a bool that's coming in with interact text and name going out. So let's go ahead and replicate these in C++. So this first function, we're going to call this a bool interact. And we're going to give it the argument uInventory component. It's going to ask us what we want to do. We want to forward declare this, make it a pointer, and we will call it in inventory. Drop down a couple lines, and let's create the second one, the set look at. So we'll go void set look at. Now this first one, we're going to make a const bool b is looking at. Then we're going to go f text ampersand interact text. Then we're going to go f name ampersand name. So now why did I put this ampersand here in the arguments? Now, if you've gone through my fundamentals, you're going to know an ampersand means we're going to pass it by reference, right? So what this also means, what we're going to end up doing here is when you put this in the scope of an argument, of an incoming argument here, what this does it will add these as return nodes within the blueprint, inside the blueprint. So I'll show you what that means in just a little bit. Where here, like if we have a bool, since this is a bool, it's going to return a bool at the end. Even if this was returning a bool, it would return a bool, but by putting these, this also puts these two attributes at the end. So at the end of the function, we can pass this information through. We can pass it by reference at the end of the function, which is what we want to do. Now we're going to have another example here where we're going to have these, and these will actually be at the front of the function call here, just like B is looking at. This is at the input of the function call. If we put a const in front of these, then in front of the ampersand and the pass by reference, then this will put it at the front of the function along with the B is looking at. Now we put const here with the B is looking at, but we don't need to put that here. I'm doing this just because we're not changing this within the function. It's slightly optimized to do it that way, but this B bool is looking at, it's not being passed by reference. So this will always be at the front of the function call as an input of the function call. But when you're doing it as pass by reference, you have to put a const if you want it passed as through the input. All right. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I'll show you what that means in just a little bit. So now we've got that. So let's give these some U functions. So let's go U function. And this one will be a blueprint native event, and it will be blueprint callable. And I'm going to give it a category of inventory interface interact. And then we're going to do the exact same thing for the set look at. So just go ahead and copy this. And there we go. So we're not going to actually set the function here within the CPP of the interact. You probably could if you wanted to, but we're not going to. Now, when we call these, when we define these, which we're going to do here in just a few minutes, you have to do it since it's a blueprint native event. When you're overriding them, it has to be an interact underscore implementable. I'll show you what that means when we get it set up here. So now let's go ahead and head back to the editor and let's create a new class. So let's go ahead and open up your content browser, and inside the items folder, I'm going to right click and create new class. I'm going to make this one an actor, hit next. I'm going to call this world item, make sure it is in the plugin runtime, and select create class. All right, just like we always do, let's go ahead and fix this error. And like I always do, I'm going to remove these comments. And now I'm going to head over into the header file of world item. And just so you can see this going on in here, I'm going to open up the includes here. So down here in the class specification here, where it says public actor, we want this to inherit the interface that we just created, the interact interface. So in order to have a class inherit an interface, you come up here and you add a comma, and we go public, and I interact is the name of the function that we just created. And there we go. You can see for me, it automatically added the include for this. If it didn't automatically add the include, make sure you include the interface header file for your interface function. So now that we can call those in here, so let's go ahead and let's create our properties now. I'm going to delete these comments, and I'm actually going to delete the tick. For now, I don't think we need tick in world item. If we need to, we'll come back and we'll adjust it later, but I don't need a tick, so I'm going to delete it. That's going to give us an error in the CPP, but we'll deal with that in just a few minutes. And create some space here under generated body. Now the first property, I'm going to go tsoft class. Actually, let's make this public. In this first one, I'm going to call tsoft class pointer, and it's going to be of type ubase item. We're going to forward declare this. I'm going to call this item type, and I got double brackets in here by accident. We'll come back and do the U properties in a minute. So next is going to be an int 32 quantity. And again, these are just variables and functions that we have from the world item in the blueprints. Let me go ahead and show you that real quick. So here we are in the world item blueprint. We've got item. Now this is just a hard object reference. We're going to make it a soft object reference. As you saw, we got quantity and despawn time. We got to create the display mesh and the billboard. So let's go back into C++. All right, so now we got the quantity, and I just noticed here this got messed up as well. I'm going to delete that. So again, tsoft class pointer of type ubase item, and we're calling it item type, int 32 quantity. Next up will be a t object pointer of uStatic mesh component, and we'll call this display mesh. Next, let's create a protected section, and in the protector, let's go t object pointer. We'll go uBillboard component, and we'll call it billboard. Next up is a float despawn time, and last we'll go t object pointer. It will be of type uWidget component, Now, one thing that we're going to be doing with this one, in the original version, if you follow along in the Blueprint series, when we interacted, when we looked at an object in the world, it printed up on the HUD. I'm removing that. I'm putting a widget on top of the item that we're looking at, and that will display the interact text that we end up using. So that's what I'm doing here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth as soon as we do the create the function here in just a minute. But let's create the UWidget component, and we're just going to add the forward declaration. I'm going to call this one interact widget, and let's give these some U properties. This one will be edit defaults only. Give it a category of inventory, world, item, and components. Next will be U property visible anywhere, blueprint read only, or read write, excuse me. Blueprint read write, category equal to inventory, world, item. And the last one will be a U property, visible anywhere, blueprint read only, category will be the inventory, world, item, and components. Let's head back up here real quick to our properties, and let's add some U properties up here. U property, this will be edit anywhere, blueprint read write, category will be inventory, world, item, and I'm going to give it a meta equal to expose on spawn equal true. So if we call this inside of blueprints and we spawn it, then this will be exposed when we create this. So don't forget the comma there. And then I'm going to copy this one. It's going to be a little bit different for the next one, but I'm going to copy it anyways. Put it down here above quantity. And the only thing that we're going to change here is we're going to get rid of the meta expose on spawn. We don't need that exposed on spawn. And then down here for this one, let's paste this again, get rid of the meta. And for this one, I'm going to extend this one, the category to components. All right, so let's head down and do the functions. So under the public, now let's go ahead and extend our interface. So in order to override functions in the interface, we go virtual. Now the first one, the interact was a bool, so virtual bool. And then now we want to call interact. And there it is. For me, it pops up here, interact implementation. So I'm going to select that one, and then it's going to extend it out for me. So we got virtual bool interact underscore implementation. And then it gave us the argument here, which is U inventory component pointer in inventory override. All right, so that's going to override that interface call for us. And let's do the next one, which is virtual void set look at implementation. And there we go. I hit enter and it puts the rest of it in there for me. Next, let's go ahead and create a function. I'm going to call this, I'm going to make this of a bool return type. I'm going to go set widget indicator const f text ampersand interact text comma const f name, and we'll go display name. All right, so like I was talking about earlier, by putting the const here in front of the f text ampersand means that this will be passed by reference, but it will come in as an internal argument instead of an external. It's not going to come down the end. So by putting the const here, this will now be on the input of the node. So if and when we use this in blueprints, this will be, we'll get to drag off of here. So we'll need the, whatever we pass in here when calling this argument will go out and into the function. All right. So with that, I'm going to copy this from my other project here, and I'll just read it to you. It's just this big comment. This function is to be set in blueprints. So we're going to make this implementable event. We'll do that here in just a second, but this function is to be set in blueprints. If you want a widget to display above the item when looked at, then implement this function there. Ensure to run proper checks for a valid widget class, etc., and return true if you set everything successfully and false otherwise. If you don't want a widget to hover over your items when looked at, then simply don't set a widget class for the widget component and it will be ignored. And then right here, we include the parameters. So what this does by putting a comment in these brackets and adding parameters here, if we hover over the function, all that information is going to be provided there as well. So even within the editor, when we call this function, we'll have this, all that text that I just read to you, as well as the parameters. I can tell you the parameters, the interact text. This is the adjective describing what happens when you interact, i.e. pickup. And then the display name is the simple name of the item you are looking at. So let's go ahead and give this a U function. This is going to be blueprint implementable event. I'm going to give it a category of inventory, and I'm just going to give it HUD I guess that'll work. And then jump down here beyond the begin play and let's create a private section. And in this private section, let's go void set despawn timer int 32. We'll call it time. And then next function is going to be a void set defaults, no arguments, and end that there. Now, we don't want these to be usable in blueprints, so we're not going to give them any U functions. So now let's go ahead and create the definition for all these. For me in Writer, I can just right click on one of them, go generate definitions, and it's going to give me everything within the header that needs a definition. I'm just going to add the check marks here, select OK, and there we go. It's dropped all these in here. Now ticks, because I deleted it in the header, I need to delete it here as well. And then I'm going to come up here and primary actor tick, can ever ticked. I'm going to make this false. Again, if we ever need tick in here, I'll set it, but otherwise this is good optimization. If you have a class, an actor, or anything that does not need a tick, then go ahead and disable it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and build it and jump back into the editor. Now I get this error here. If you get this error, again, most of the time it's just going to be because you need to shut down your editor. So I'm just going to close the editor, wait for it to completely close down, and I'm going to try building it again. There we go. It succeeded that time. So go ahead and jump back into the editor. All right, so I'm just sitting here in the player blueprint, and just to show you what I was talking about with the interface call, I'm going to come over here to the class settings. We don't need to actually implement this here, but I'm going to add it anyways just so I can show you. I'm going to go interact, and I'm going to grab the interface that we created, and there we go. That's now implemented. We can come over here. I'm going to compile it just to make sure everything's there. We're going to go inventory, interface, interact, and here we go. Let's open up the set look at, and there we go. So by using the pass by reference without a const, this is what we get here when we're calling this function within the editor. So since I don't need this, I'm going to go ahead and delete this and remove this interface from here. I just wanted to show you that. And that's going to wrap up this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, go down, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe while you're down there liking it. Hit that notification bell, be notified whenever we drop a new video. If you got any questions, leave them down in the comments down below, or come on over, join the Discord and ask questions over there. Join the community, be part of the conversation. And until the next one, peace.